this is my first time going live. It's either going to be a total disaster, in which case I apologize, or it's going to go great, in which case you're welcome. So if you've ever wanted to build a birdhouse, this is what we're going to do. So it's 10:30 at night. I'm out in the garage. It's freezing cold, but you know what? I was like, let's do this. So if you've ever wanted to build your first birdhouse, here's what you're going to need. We're going to build this out of a single fence picket. All right, I'm doing this with a handsaw because some people don't have a miter saw, and why not? It's more fun this way. I'm going to be using a nail gun to make life easier. If you want to just use nails, that's completely up to you. I have a drill here because I'm going to hinge the top of this. You don't need these. You can do it without it. That's going to be completely up to you. But this is how I'm going to build my birdhouse. So I have a drill because I am going to have to drill a 1.5-inch hole. This house is for bluebirds. That's the basic hole you want to go with. Makes it nice for them to get into. Helps keep predators out. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot here. We're just going to get started. This does not take a lot of cuts. I'm going to try and keep it nice and simple. So if you've ever wanted to build your first birdhouse, let's get started. Again, I am using a cedar fence picket here. And this is a pretty straightforward build. I think there's like 6 cuts in the whole thing. It's pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my first measurement. And I'm using the dog-eared fence picket. You can use a piece of 1x6, all sorts of options. But I'm going to measure 16 inches down, and I'm going to be going from this end because this is going to be on the top of the house here. So tape measure 16 inches down, and I'm going to make a mark. Now, if I was using a miter saw here, this would be simple. I would just make a little dash. I'd go over to the miter saw. I'd cut it on the line. Boom. Since I'm using a handsaw here, though, I'm going to make sure I use my speed square. So I have my mark. I'm going to set my speed square up, and I'm actually going to use it to get a nice straight line there. All right, just makes sense. So if you are using a handsaw, make sure you give yourself something to follow. So I make my line. Now to make my life easier, I am using a table that wobbles a little bit, and I want to make sure this is nice and secure. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clamp this board down. I'll kind of move this down here. And I like to clamp it in 2 spots, and the cut is a lot smoother when you do that. So make sure your board is nice and secure. And also make sure your cut is close to whatever surface you're cutting on. That way it's not wobbling too much. But also make sure you're not cutting anything underneath it. If you've seen some of my videos from work, I have a table where a student had a circular saw cutting a board, and he went right through my table. All right, so again, this first cut, basically just 16 inches down. And when using a handsaw, most people tend to go right on that line and start cutting on it. But you gotta remember, whether you're using a handsaw or a miter saw or whatever it is, you still have to factor in the thickness of that blade. So if I cut right on this line, technically my piece is going to be shorter than 16 inches. Now for what I'm building right here, a bluebird house, that's not really a big deal, but develop good habits. So I'm actually going to go slightly to the scrap side. All right, so I'm going to go down to that line at 16. And when you're starting with a handsaw, what I like to do is I'll start by pulling back with it. And that kind of gets you started nicely. All right, so I'm going to pull back in, and then I can just work my way through. And this will be a quick cut. I know I don't have the miter saw. You're like, this is going to take forever. If you're using the saw the right way, which is using a whole saw, it goes pretty slow. That didn't take a whole lot longer than a miter saw would have taken. So what I did there is that's my 16-inch piece. That is the back of the birdhouse right here. So first cut, already done. We're going to move right into 2, and this one's a little bit more complicated. So when we look at a birdhouse here, we have the side, and we want that slope on our roof. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to measure a 10-inch mark and a 9-inch mark. All right, so I'm going to try and bring you a little closer over here so you can see this. I'm going to measure up 9 inches. I'm going to measure up 10 inches, and then I'm going to use a straight edge to connect those lines. And that is going to give me that angle I want for my roof. So I'm going to move this clamp. So again, on one side of the board, go up 9 inches. Make a mark. On the other side of the board, go up 10 inches. Make a mark. Use a straight edge. And connect them. Now I'm going to show you a really easy way to make these two sides match in just a second here. So we make the first cut, and then we're going to do something really simple for the second cut to make sure these are identical. Remember a little tip here too, I'm putting my clamps on like this, bad habit. Do it upside down so this piece isn't sticking up. I can't even tell how many times I've cut my arm on a clamp because I have it sticking up. Alright, so again, we clamp this down. I'm trying to make life easy here. And once again, I'm going to start by pulling through the cut, getting it lined up where I want it. And they just So, you see, we have our first side. Now, if I was doing that on a miter saw, I would have measured the 9, measured the 10, drawn the line, and then just lined the blade up along that line. I'll also show you in another video how to get an angle using a speed square. Now, here's the big trick here. I have this first angled piece. I'm going to set it down right on top of this one and match it. And then all I have to do is come over here with a pencil and just trace that line. So now when I make that cut, these two pieces will be identical. So I know that it's gonna be nice and even. Not that the birds are gonna care because, well, they're birds. But so I'm gonna slide this down. And boom. All right, now it's like 20 degrees out, which is why I'm so bundled up. But I also have the heater going, and it's getting hot here, so. All right, now I'm gonna make the second cut for the side here. I'm gonna start with sliding a little bit. I'm trying to rush a little too much. So, even though I'm using a handsaw, this house is coming along pretty quickly here. I already have my back, and I have my two sides. So, 1, 2, 3, already done there. Now, there's a little bit of an issue here with the plans. So the plans that I found, it says you measure a 4-inch piece. And what they're talking about is for this bottom right here. Here's the problem. Not all fence pickets are the same width. If you've worked with fence pickets, you know, I mean, they might be 5.5 inches to 6 inches, anywhere in there. So what I like to do here is I'm going to figure out how wide this is minus the two sides. So what I would basically do is take this, put my two pieces here, and whatever the distance left over there is, that's how big I want to cut this piece. All right, so I can do that. I can get my measurement there, which is not 4 inches like it said it should be. It's actually just over 4¼ inches. So I'm going to make this next measurement at that number that I just had, which is just past 4¼ and that's my next cut. So again, get your straight edge, line it up, make your mark, and again, no miter saw out here, we're just doing this by hand. So I am going to set this up. So the piece I'm cutting now is for the floor. All right, again, keep it close to the surface you're cutting on. It's going to reduce how much of your energy gets wasted, basically. And again, these cuts are quick. Even though I'm not using a miter saw, you can see these cuts have only taken a few seconds each. So again, I'm going to start with the fold. Get it in there. And use that whole saw when you cut. So, just so you really get what that piece is here, I have the back of the birdhouse, I have the two sides of the birdhouse, and this piece is going to go in between them. All right, so if I did that correctly, that should basically take me to the full width of the birdhouse. And I'll give you a nice clean look there. You can see that worked out perfectly. If I just followed the plans and measured the 4 inches like it said to do, this would not have worked. Again, because this fence picket was a little bit wider than the average one is. So we've only got 2 pieces left to cut here. We need to cut the front right here, where the hole is going to go, and we need to cut the roof. Now the version I like to make here is the hinged roof. Remember a couple years ago I made my first few birdhouses at work. We tried to sell them at a craft fair and nobody bought any of them. And they were like, well, you can't clean it out. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about birdhouses. So I was like, why would you clean it out? And they were like, after each season. So we started doing the hinged roof. There's a bunch of different ways people do this. Some people make it so the sides open. I've seen drop floors. We're just going to do a hinged roof today. So next thing I'm going to cut is going to be my front piece. All right, and that is going to be 9 inches, just a straight 9-inch cut. So measuring up 9 inches on the board, right there. Grab my speed square. Again, if you're using a miter saw, you wouldn't have to do this, but again, I decided I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way today. And I should have started my stopwatch. I could kind of see how long this is taking. Probably says it on there somewhere. Again, I've never done live before, so. I've got my mark, 9 inches. This is the front. Again, make the cut. Nice and easy. And all that leaves now is the roof. This is the last cut you need to do here. Like, this is going quick, building your first birdhouse, nice and easy. We're going to do one last measurement at 7.5 inches. And what I'll do is after I get this video, I guess YouTube's going to upload it later because it's live, I will add all these measurements down into the description. And at some point I'll get a website up and running where I can have these plans there. But for now, I'll just put in the description. Again, once I'm able to go back in and do some editing. So again, this is the last cut, and I have not been working on this for very long. And if you're using a miter saw, or a circular saw, or any kind of power saw, you're probably doing this a little faster than me. So, again, 7.5 inches. I start with my pole. When you're cutting, please don't do this. All right, use the hole saw. You'll see how fast those pieces drop off. Very quickly. So, I have my roof now. So all my cutting is done. So I've been working on this for, it says 13 minutes. That's me talking and me using a handsaw. Now I can cut all the pieces I need for a birdhouse here. So let's kind of show you how this gets put together. I'll lay it out so you understand what these pieces are. And then we'll kind of work from there. Now get them attached. So this is what I have left over. You know what? The back for your next birdhouse, honestly. So I'm just going to set that aside. So the longest piece that I cut, that is the back of the birdhouse. The 2 angled pieces, remember we cut those 2 pieces to match. Those are my sides. Boom, boom, right there. The smallest one that I cut, that is my bottom. All right, that's going to go through here, right between those. What that leaves is your front. This is what we're going to drill the hole in, and I'll give you that measurement in a second. There's that. And then your roof. And you can see here how it's going to be a birdhouse now. All right, so let's get that hole drilled. And for some people, this is the hardest part because you have to have a big enough bit. So again, for bluebirds, and this is a typical bluebird house, 1.5 inch hole. And I will tell you, these work. All right, I have made a few of these. I put them out when spring starts. I get birds in there. I get eggs in there. They're good to go. Very effective. This drill will be more effective with a battery. So let me grab that. They tend to work better that way. All right, again, and I'm using a 1.5 inch Forstner bit right here. Now, for the measurement, and I'll point out here, I left this laid out because I like to make sure I'm grabbing the right pieces. One time I drilled a hole in the roof. You don't want to do that, all right? So, I'm going to get my hole drilled for the front here. I'm going to measure up 6.5 inches from the bottom, kind of around the middle of the board here, because that's where it's going to end up being. So 6.5 inches up, that's where I'm going to put a little pencil mark. Then I'm going to measure across the board, which this board is just under 6 inches. So I'm going to go just under 3 inches to be my halfway point. All right, what I'm going to do, so you see those two marks. Hopefully you can see them, lighting's not the greatest. So that was the one coming from that way. That was 6.5 inches up, and that is the middle of my board. That's where the center of my Forstner bit's going to hit. All right, so I'm going to clamp this down. Please clamp it down. Please do not try to hold this by hand. If you're using a tiny bit, go ahead, but when you're using a big 1.5 inch bit, not the best idea. All right, so I'm going to clamp this thing down. I'm going to put 2 on it. And there's some things you can do here to avoid a blowout. Because what's going to happen if I just take this and I drill all the way through this hole with a bit this size, the back end of it is going to just kind of blow out. Now, honestly, for what we're doing, it's a birdhouse. The birds don't care. Put that on the inside, nobody will ever see it. But we also want to create good habits. So 2 things you can do. 1, you can put a scrap piece of wood underneath it. So when you drill through this, that piece ends up being what blows out. But what I try and do in a situation like this is I'm going to drill most of the way through until I can see that center hole popping through. Then I flip the board and I'll come in from the other side. I'm going to try and do that here, but again, for what this is, if I go all the way through, it's really not a big deal because again, the birds don't care. All right, so I'm going to set up that Forstner bit right at that center point. Kind of check, because again, I want to go to where it just starts to pop through. And sometimes that happens. And again, for what we're doing, that's not a big deal. But you know what? That gives me a chance to show you what the blowout is. So, here's what I'm talking about. That can happen. So, again, I could have stopped that simply by taking this scrap piece I have and clamping it there when I drilled the hole. All right? But I didn't, and I ended up with that. So here's what you do. You put that on the inside of the birdhouse, and again, nobody will ever see it. They'll see this side, which is beautiful. So we're ready to assemble this thing. And again, I've been doing this for 18 minutes with hand tools. All right, so now's where you really get to make it a birdhouse. Get this out of the way. I am done with this saw. We can get rid of that. I am done with this drill. I am going to need the battery though for my nail gun. I can get rid of that. Now, again, it is freezing out, so I've had my glue over here by the heater, trying to get the flow a little better because it was cold and it wasn't going too well. So, I am using 1.5 inch brad nails. If you don't have a nail gun, any kind of nails will do here. You're going to be gluing it also. When you use glue and nails, the glue is what's really holding the thing together. It's almost like the nails are just holding it in place while the glue dries. That's really what it comes down to. So we're going to start this way. I like to take my 2 sides and my bottom, and that's the first thing I want to connect. So the first thing I'm going to put together is this. All right, so how I'm going to do that, I'm going to take that bottom piece and the 2 long ends, I'm going to put glue on there. So, don't want that to come off that far. I just broke my glue. You know what? That's okay, it's glue, things happen. The top literally popped off of it though. It's all right, still comes out. Actually comes out better than usual. I might keep it off. All right, a little bit of glue on that side. A little bit of glue on this side. All right, again, I'm going to put that between these two pieces. That's going right there. Make sure that you have your angles matching. If you mix them up, your roof's not going to look right. So right now I have it so the 9-inch piece is here and it's sloping downward. And I'm actually going to throw a clamp on that just for a minute. And that's going to kind of hold it where I want it here. All right, so you can see that's the basic shape of the house here. All right, so what I'm going to do now is, again, I'm using a nail gun. So I'm going to pop 2 nails in towards the top, one on each side. One on that side. One on that side. We do the same thing on the bottom. Pop a nail there. And a nail there. All right, so that puts me now boom. Now I want to attach this to the back of the birdhouse. All right? So I'm going to get my back here, and you have some freedom here. Okay? So if you think about it, this is 16 inches. This is only 10 inches here. So there's room. You can make some choices here. I can put this in the middle, which is what I typically do. So if you look at it that way, I've seen people put it all the way down by the bottom. They want more room at the top. If you were going to like laser engrave this or wood burn it, I'd probably put it toward the bottom and put something here. I've done these where I've laser engraved on here on the front, but for the average person making their first birdhouse, you're not doing that. So I'm just going to basically aim for the middle. All right. So where I'm going to put my glue here is on the back of the 10-inch piece. I'm going to put glue on there, and then I'm going to stick it on there, and we're going to pop a few nails in. Again, I did not plan on the top of my glue popping off, but that's okay. If I can do this with broken glue and a handsaw, you can do this too. All right, I'm going to set that on there where I want it, which is right about there. All right, now you can take this, slide it off a little bit, clamp it in place. If you don't want to clamp it and you want to kind of hold it and just flip it, whatever works for you. What I'm going to do here is, as I'm attaching it, I'm going to make sure I kind of pull these out so that they're lined up with the edge. You can see right now that's in a little bit, but it's nothing I can't move just by pulling out when I nail it. So I just want to make sure this is lined up pretty well. Again, if it's your first birdhouse, whatever you're doing right now, as long as you don't drop the camera like I almost just did there, whatever you're doing, be proud of it. You're building something, all right? That's the goal here. You want to make something that you can use. So my bottom is lined up really well here. At the end, I'm going to pop my nail in. And then again, like I said, for the top, I'm going to pull that out a little bit and make sure it's even with the end. Now for the other side, do the same thing. The bottom's solid. There's a knot right here, so I'm actually going to go up a little bit higher. I don't want to hit that knot. And then up here, same thing. Pop a nail in. So that's where we're at. All right, we have our back, we have our sides, we have our bottom. Now we're going to put on the front. All right, so this one's nice and easy. Obviously my glue is going to go right here on the surface where the front is going to contact. Put some glue on there. It's just really weird with the top missing on it. It's coming out a little funky, but that's okay. They'll still get the job done. And this piece actually split a little bit. There's a little section missing. If you look here, it kind of angled in. Even that is not a big deal because guess what? Now you can't see it anymore. All right? And again, the birds don't really care about stuff like that. They just want a home. So make sure this is lined up at the bottom. Pop the nail down here. Over here. Yeah, if you don't have a nail gun, you could very easily just be doing this by hand. that's where we're at. Now, you'll notice, I want to point this out here, that lip always ends up being a little bit over here. That's okay. You actually want that. If you don't have that, what happens is the birdhouse can get too hot and it will actually kill the babies. So you want some airflow up towards the top of that. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a hinge. You don't have to do this, all right? The hinge is going to allow me to clean this thing out. I'm going to put my top on like this, and I'm going to put 2 little hinges right here, and that way when I want to clean this thing out, I can open it up. If you don't have hinges, that's okay. You can literally just put some glue up here, attach this, and boom, you've got a birdhouse. Now there are advocates for, you know, that's the wrong way and you'll never get birds in it. I've talked to people who say they have never cleaned out a birdhouse and they have birds in it every single year. But we're gonna do it what I've been told is the right way, all right? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna set this just like that, all right? I have this little set of hinges right here. All right, these are very tiny. I bought a set of these off Amazon. I don't have a link for it right now. As soon as I have a link, I'll shoot it in there. I buy these, it's like 50 or 100 hinges, and you can use these for small boxes, birdhouses, all sorts of things. So, I am just going to put these hinges in, and this is cedar. It's nice and easy to work with. I'm not even going to use a drill for this, just to show you how easy it is. All right, well, easy as far as screwing them in. Getting the screws to line up properly can be a pain in the butt sometimes. But I'm going to place my hinges. And you can measure this, you can eyeball this, it's completely up to you. I basically come in about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. Kind of give you a closer look at that. I'm gonna line them up right around there, and I'm just gonna pop in 2 screws there, 2 screws up there, 2 down to the bottom, 2 up at the top. All right, so in another couple quick minutes here, we're gonna have a birdhouse done. And if you've been building along here, then you can do the same thing. And it's a great first project. If you're new to woodworking or if you're just new to birdhouses. Like I said, I did this with hand tools. I did not use my miter saw. I did use a drill and a nail gun, but the cutting is the big thing. Another part of why I didn't use the miter saw, again, this is my first live video, and they're loud. So when I do videos that I record normally, I can, you know, edit that sound out. I can't do that on live. So I'm literally just going in here and popping in these screws. These little hinges can be a little bit of a pain to work with. It helps if you get a magnetic screwdriver. All right, that'll hold the screw better. Again, just popping these screws in. We are almost done here. If you're enjoying this, if you're building your first birdhouse, or if you're just having fun, why haven't you hit that subscribe button yet? Just wondering. I'm going to be doing a lot more builds. Actually, I'll call a timeout real quick. I want to show you what the next one I might do is. So this is a bird feeder. My wife's grandparents had one of these sitting out front. Someone made them a long time ago. So I'm going to do a build on this soon. So you open it up, you drop the food in there. There's an angled piece, it drops out. So make sure you're around for next time where I'm going to make one of those. All right, enough self-promotion. Let's finish a birdhouse. And you could even do this with one bigger hinge in the middle if you wanted to. Or again, you don't even need to use a hinge. If you just want to glue and nail it in, that is perfectly fine. You just won't be able to clean it out. But if you look up other ways to build these, you'll see people have lots of different ways to open the sides and different things like that. This is just the technique I like. That is one of the beautiful things about birdhouses, though, is there's so many different ways you can build them. You got a little bit of self-expression going. Now, if you are planning on building these to sell, this is a very important tip right here. If you're going to sell anything, you're not trying to make what you want. You're trying to make what the customers want. And that's a tough lesson for a lot of people to get. Because you could be like, you know, this is my favorite way to build these birdhouses. This is how I'm going to do it. And your customers might not like it. So that's where you have to decide, are you building this for you, or are you building this to make some money? So if you're building these to sell, or you're building anything to sell, this goes with any project you're doing, you need to focus on what the customers want, not what you want. Now, if you have the luxury of this is just a hobby, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to build what I want to build, and if it sells, great, and if it doesn't sell, I'm okay with that, then That is a nice luxury to have. So what's happening here is I told you how great it is to use magnetic screws, but these hinges are so light that the screwdriver is actually causing the hinges to move. There we go. All right, 3 more screws and we are done. And if you've been doing this with me, you have successfully built your first birdhouse. Almost there. See if I can do this in 30 seconds. I was hoping to do this whole thing in less than a half hour, and I just crossed that half-hour mark. But, you know what? I'm having fun out here. One screw to go, and we are done. And guess what? If you just did that, you just built your first birdhouse. Again, this is a great beginner project right here. I'm gonna be making a lot more beginner projects, so make sure you like and subscribe. If you make one of these, let me know. I'd love to know if you have success with it, if you run into any challenges. One thing I do want to point out again, just so you don't think you messed up, is that opening right there. That opening is very important. That lets heat out in the summer. I'm in Virginia. Even though it's freezing right now, it does get hot. So if you don't have some kind of ventilation at the top, what's gonna happen is those baby birds are gonna get cooked. You don't want that. So this was a 31-minute build basically with a handsaw, and this is a birdhouse. If you watch this, thank you. I hope you got something out of it. If you've never built a birdhouse before, this is a great place to start. Make sure you subscribe. I will have a ton more builds coming. You have a great day. Now, told you this is my first live. How do I turn it off?